For nearly 3 years, the world has searched for Summer Wells, a little girl who vanished from her family's home in Hawkins County, Tennessee, leaving behind nothing but questions and suspicion. We've heard countless theories from abduction to accident, cover-up to conspiracy. But now, someone has stepped forward with a location. Not a theory, a location. Morrison Cemetery. He calls himself Fred. He claims to know with absolute certainty where Summer's remains are buried. No hesitation, no uncertain language, just a direct declaration. She's there. That's where she is. And the internet is torn in two. Some people believe this could be the biggest breakthrough yet. Others are already calling it another distraction. Another person chasing views off a tragedy. But as investigators, we don't dismiss leads because they sound outrageous. We break them apart and examine what's real and what is manipulation. Who is Fred? Is he connected to the family? Did he overhear something? Is he repeating what someone told him in confidence, or is he making things up as he goes? More importantly, could this be the truth the police have silently known but never confirmed? Could Morrison Cemetery actually be holding the answer we've all been searching for? In tonight's investigation, we're putting this claim under a microscope, comparing it to the official timeline, past search areas, known behavior patterns, and the geography of that cemetery. We'll listen carefully to Fred's actual words frame by frame, breaking down the tone, the body language, the credibility, or lack thereof. Because sometimes the truth comes from a confession, and sometimes it comes from someone who knows the guilty and is tired of keeping their secret. If Fred is telling the truth, Morrison Cemetery may not just be a quiet graveyard in Tennessee. It may be the final resting place of a little girl and the final crack in the lie that's been told to us for years. But if he's lying, then this could be one of the most cruel misinformation stunts yet, dragging this family and this community through another wave of false hope and horror. So tonight on Dark Thoughts we're doing what we always do, ignoring the noise, focusing on the evidence, and following the shadows until we find the source. Because whether Fred is a liar, a messenger, or a witness, his words have opened a door that cannot be ignored. And we're about to walk right through it. If you're here to get closer to the truth, stay with me. If you are here for justice, please stay back and watch, because after hearing what this man claims, you may never look at this case the same again. These are not just holes in an investigation. They are cracks where the truth could be hiding. Because children don't just disappear without someone somewhere knowing what happened. And in this case, the silence is almost as disturbing as the disappearance itself. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. We've just crossed 4,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 5,000, then 6,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button. And where are you watching from? Because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. Can a single YouTube video point us to the body of a missing child? Or is it just another false trail leading the public deeper into confusion? That's the question we begin with tonight. Because a man named Fred has made a statement that has shaken up the Summer Wells investigation in a way we haven't seen in months. He says the answer is no longer hidden. He says it's buried, and he claims to know exactly where. Morrison Cemetery, a quiet stretch of land in rural Tennessee surrounded by trees and silence and now tangled in controversy. The moment this video went live with Fred boldly stating he knows where Summer is buried, the true crime community was thrown into chaos. Some people gasped, others rolled their eyes. But everyone stopped and listened. Because even in a case full of rumors, this wasn't just a theory. It was a location. A place that could be searched. A place with graves, soil, and real history beneath it. A place where answers could physically exist. So, that's where we begin tonight. We're digging into the video that sparked a new wave of investigation. We're not just reacting with emotion. We're analyzing it the way detectives would. Is Fred a truth bearer or a storyteller? Does his claim line up with anything in the official timeline? Are there signs that law enforcement ever searched Morrison Cemetery or tried to avoid it? And can a YouTube tip, as wild as it sounds, actually solve a case that experts and agents could not? Because in true crime, one thing is certain. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs don't come from police briefings or forensic labs. They come from a quiet voice saying something the world never considered. But sometimes those voices don't lead to truth. They lead us straight into deeper deception. Tonight, we find out which one Fred is. Who exactly is Fred? That's the question at the center of this. In the video, he doesn't present credentials. He doesn't show proof of affiliation. He simply introduces himself as someone who knows where Summer Wells is buried. And that alone leaves us with a problem. Credibility versus desperation. Is he a local who claims to have insider knowledge? A man who heard rumors, saw patterns, and convinced himself? Or is he someone who's indirectly connected to the family? Someone who was around watching quietly and now feels the need to speak. We've seen this before in true crime individuals who insert themselves into cases claiming secret knowledge. Sometimes they're telling the truth. Other times they're chasing attention. But Fred's tone is different. He doesn't sound excited. He sounds resolved, calm, almost emotionless, as if he's been holding this information for a long time. And that's what makes this more chilling. Why come forward now after all this time? Why walk into the public eye and drop a location like a bomb? Some believe he may be feeling moral pressure. Maybe he heard something years ago and can't ignore it anymore. Others think he's seeking attention or trying to go viral using a case that already has millions of eyes on it. But there's a third possibility, one that investigators can't afford to ignore, that Fred may be connected to the truth more directly than he's admitting. And this revelation might be a disguised confession or a controlled leak meant to deflect guilt. His motivation determines everything. If he's genuine, this could crack open the case. If he's lying, this could lead investigators on a dangerous distraction, wasting time, draining resources, and harming the family further. And then there's the darkest possibility that Fred knows more because he's part of the story trying to disguise knowledge as a tip to see how the public reacts. So before we even analyze the cemetery itself, we have to understand Fred, his voice, his timing, his demeanor, and any connection he may have to Hawkins County, the Wells family, or the land around Morrison Cemetery. Because sometimes who is speaking matters more than what they claim. Now, let's look at what Fred actually says, word for word, claim for claim. In the video, he doesn't speak in vague terms, like somewhere in the woods. He points directly to a graveyard, Morrison Cemetery. He describes a specific section on the far side near older faded tombstones. He mentions that the ground looks slightly uneven, as if something was buried there more recently than the official graves. He even gives a reason. He says Summer was placed there quietly at night by someone who knew the cemetery well, someone who wouldn't look suspicious being there. He claims this person had access and possibly family ties to people already buried there, which means no one would question disturbed soil or nighttime visits. That's a very specific set of circumstances, not the kind of thing you could easily guess unless you live near that cemetery or know people connected to it. He also mentions a certain marker stone that doesn't match the others, a small reference point. He says, if you stand near that stone at dusk, the ground about 3 steps behind it feels softer. He insists that's where she is. This kind of detail forces us to pay attention because while it could be completely fabricated, it also matches the kind of precision someone would have if they had actually been to that spot or worse, participated in putting something there. What makes it even more unsettling is that he doesn't try to dramatize it. He speaks plainly, almost coldly, like someone stating a fact they've accepted. He doesn't claim a vision or dream. He claims knowledge, and that raises the stakes. Because if law enforcement checks that spot and finds nothing, he becomes a fraud. But if they check it and find anything unusual, disturbed soil, human remains, or even traces, then Fred isn't just a random voice. He becomes a primary suspect or a key witness. So before we dismiss this as just another sensational claim, we have to acknowledge the precision. He gave directions, a location, a motive, and even suggests who might have done it. That kind of detail either comes from involvement or from someone who believes they're finally ready to break a secret they've carried for far too long. Now, let's compare Fred's disturbing claim with what we know from official investigations. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, along with local authorities, conducted multiple large-scale searches in the weeks and months after Summer disappeared. They brought in K-9 units, helicopters, divers, infrared imaging, and volunteer search crews. But according to all public records, Morrison Cemetery was never listed as a primary search site. Most of the early searches focused on the woods directly surrounding the Wells property, caves, water sources, sheds, wells, abandoned structures. Investigators did expand outward, but cemeteries were not a priority, mainly because they were considered public grounds that didn't fit the abduction narrative the parents pushed. That's important because if the family was emphasizing a kidnapping by strangers, the idea of a planned burial would have contradicted that. Now, if Fred is telling the truth that Summer was placed in that cemetery at night, it would mean that someone very close to her knew those search zones well and intentionally chose a location that felt out of scope. And that lines up with another unsettling fact: Morrison Cemetery is less than 7 miles from the Wells home, close enough to access quietly, far enough to avoid immediate suspicion. Another chilling detail: there were rumors online during the first year that a cemetery might be connected, but they were dismissed quickly as dark speculation or disrespectful. Law enforcement never publicly confirmed excavations or ground-penetrating radar used at any cemetery, which means officially this spot may have never been fully cleared. If that cemetery was never searched with cadaver dogs or scanned, then Fred's claim enters a different category. A location that is both chilling and plausible. That's why this matters. Because if someone deliberately used a cemetery, a place where digging at night wouldn't raise suspicion, that would explain how a body could remain hidden even after hundreds of searches nearby. And whether Fred is a truth teller or a liar, the fact remains from the public records alone. Morrison Cemetery has gaps the investigation never filled. As soon as Fred's video began to circulate, the reaction online was immediate and polarized. Within hours, true crime channels were clipping his statement, sharing it across YouTube, Reddit, and Telegram groups focused on the Summer Wells case. Some viewers said they felt chills. Others said it sounded staged. But the one thing everyone agreed on: it sounded specific, too specific to ignore. Comment sections quickly split into two camps. Those who believed this could finally be the first real actionable lead in years, and those who warned it was another cruel hoax. But even skeptics admitted the level of detail was unusual. On Reddit, users began overlaying Fred's description onto Google Maps and cemetery layouts, trying to match the odd tombstone in the ground that looked disturbed. Some claimed there were old rumors about certain family members visiting that cemetery late at night in 2021, though none of those claims were officially verified. The more people rewatched Fred's clip, the more they slowed it down, analyzing his eyes, his tone, his breathing, trying to determine if this was grief-driven truth or performative manipulation. One comment with thousands of likes read, "It's either a breakthrough or he's involved." Another wrote, "If he's lying, this is one of the most heartless stunts I've ever seen. But if he's telling the truth, somebody better start digging." Even smaller YouTube creators began releasing breakdown videos of his claim. Some even planning to drive to Morrison Cemetery themselves to investigate the ground near the area he described. This is the dangerous potential of a viral tip. It can mobilize the public before law enforcement even has a chance to respond. The question is, will this force action or cause chaos? Because right now, public pressure is skyrocketing and people are demanding that Morrison Cemetery be searched immediately. So, now that this claim has gone viral, we have to ask, how do you actually prove or disprove a statement like Fred's? Because in true investigation, emotion is not evidence. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, soil disturbance patterns. Those are the tools that can confirm if something is buried beneath that cemetery soil. But here's the problem. To do that, law enforcement would need probable cause to dig or a warrant to disturb marked gravesites, which means Fred's words have to be taken seriously enough for authorities to intervene. Some viewers argue that even if Fred is lying, the location still needs to be searched just in case. Others point out that false leads drain resources, waste manpower, and re-traumatize families. In past high-profile cases, hundreds of hours have been lost because of fake tips. Police departments are cautious for that reason. But the specificity of his claim, the exact stone, the description of the uneven soil gives this tip more weight than random rumors. If a cadaver dog were brought to that exact placement and hit on a scent, everything would change immediately. Investigators would then need to cross-reference cemetery records. Who is buried there? Who purchased plots, funeral records, maintenance schedules? If someone buried Summer there illegally, that means someone had access to the grounds, either through family connection or familiarity with the location. That makes this more than just a theory. It becomes a line of inquiry that could expose accomplices or cover-ups. So, how credible is Fred? On the surface, unknown. No credentials, no proof, but his specificity pushes the question, is he just another attention seeker? Or is he quietly leading investigators to the one place they never thought to look? The only way to know is the one thing no one has done yet. Dig. There's a reason claims like Fred's capture the public imagination, even in a case filled with misinformation. When a child goes missing and years go by with no resolution, people begin to crave certainty, any form of it, just to end the silence. Morrison Cemetery is more than a location in this story. It's a symbol. To some, it represents the possibility of closure. To others, it represents the horror that Summer may have been buried and forgotten while everyone looked elsewhere. Psychologists say that in long-term missing person cases, the public often gravitates toward gravesite theories. Cemeteries carry a dark form of truth. They imply finality. And when someone points to a cemetery with confidence, people instinctively feel both fear and hope. Fear that this nightmare may be real and hope that the endless uncertainty might finally end. That's exactly why Fred's statement is so powerful. It taps into that psychological need for answers. It breaks the cycle of what if and offers something concrete, a place on a map. People who have followed this case for years now feel like they've been offered a key, even if they're not sure the lock is real. Some people want it to be real because they're desperate for resolution. Others are terrified that it might be because that would mean the story of Summer Wells is over. And behind all of that is a darker question. If Fred's claim is accurate, how many people around him have known this truth and stayed silent? This is the horrifying psychology of the claim. It turns a single video into a possible moral indictment of an entire community. That's why people can't turn away. Because this isn't just about a YouTube statement. It's about whether a stranger just exposed the deepest secret no one in that town would speak aloud. The moment Fred's claim started spreading, a new wave of tension hit this case. Not just online, but in real life. Because when someone publicly declares they know where a child is buried, it doesn't stay on the internet. It spills into the real world emotionally, socially, and even legally. Now, imagine you are the Wells family. Guilty or innocent, you hear a man boldly stating your child is in a specific cemetery. For a mother already living under suspicion and public blame, that kind of statement cuts deep. If it turns out to be false, it isn't just another rumor. It's psychological torture. It forces the parents to relive the possibility that their child died and was buried, all based on a stranger's video. That kind of mental damage can push an already fractured family over the edge. Then there's the media effect. Small local stations might rush to the cemetery with cameras, hoping to break a sensational update. True crime influencers might start live streaming from Morrison Cemetery, trying to be the first to expose the truth. Meanwhile, the public starts showing up. People driving to the cemetery at night, filming headstones, poking at the soil, walking over graves with flashlights. Some of them might even bring shovels. That creates a serious evidence risk. If there truly is something buried there, untrained civilians could disturb the scene before law enforcement gets proper warrants or tools. They could contaminate soil, move rocks, leave their own DNA behind. Suddenly, any chance to verify Fred's claim scientifically is lost. All because the story went viral before the police could respond officially. And on the law enforcement side, they're now forced into a high-pressure situation. If they ignore the claim and someone later finds evidence, the public destroys them. If they act immediately and dig and nothing is found, they're accused of wasting time and tax money. This pressure can distort judgment, forcing investigators to chase leads based on emotion instead of verified intelligence. And every wrong turn burns valuable time that could be spent on real proven evidence. Worst of all, if Fred is lying, deliberately or not, it drains public trust. People become numb, disillusioned. The next legitimate tip might be ignored because they've already been fooled too many times, and that's the most dangerous consequence of all. False hope can kill real justice. At this point in the episode, this investigation is no longer just a presentation. It becomes a call to action because truth doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it comes from vigilant eyes watching closely from all over the world. And that's where you, the viewer, matter more than ever. I want everyone watching, whether you're in the US, the UK, South Africa, Australia, Canada, Ghana, anywhere around the world to pause this video and write in the comments where are you watching from. Let's show how far Summer Wells's name has traveled. Because the farther this story reaches, the harder it is for lies to stay buried. Go back to Fred's original video. Timestamp anything that looks off. The way he avoids eye contact. The way he pauses after mentioning the cemetery, the tone of his voice when he says buried. If you notice any slip, hesitation, or odd body language, write it down because someone watching this right now may recognize that voice. Someone local might know exactly who Fred is, and someone somewhere might connect a dot that investigators missed. Share this episode with one person who still believes in justice. Not for views, for awareness. The more people who see this, the higher the chance that someone who lives near Morrison Cemetery or someone connected to that town might speak up. And if you believe we shouldn't stop until the full truth comes out, then make sure you're subscribed here on Dark Truth's YouTube channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a single update because I'll be tracking every twist in Fred's story, every new lead, every clue that surfaces. If you believe silence protects the guilty, then do not be silent. Comment, share, subscribe, and stay locked in because sometimes justice doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts with thousands of people refusing to look away. As we close tonight's investigation, one thing is painfully clear. Whether Fred is a liar, a messenger, or a witness, his words have reopened a wound and possibly exposed a truth that cannot stay buried forever. His claim about Morrison Cemetery isn't just a rumor. It's a test. A test of how much the public still cares. A test of whether law enforcement will act and a test of how far the truth is willing to push itself into the light. Because when someone makes a statement this bold, naming the exact place where a missing child might be buried, one of two things must happen next. The claim gets verified or the person behind it becomes part of the investigation. Either way, something changes. And that's why in our next episode, I'm not just reacting. I'll be comparing this new cemetery claim with every prior search map released by the TBI. I'll show you exactly which zones were searched, which ones were skipped, and whether Morrison Cemetery was quietly left untouched for a reason. And if necessary, we will go even deeper, analyzing land ownership records, burial permits, and anyone connected to that cemetery, who also had ties to the Wells family. Because if Fred isn't crazy, then someone out there might be very nervous right now. Summer Wells still deserves truth, not theories, not guesswork, not rumors. Actual truth. And if that truth is buried in Morrison Cemetery, then we'll go there step by step until there is nothing left hidden in that soil. Until then, stay alert, stay subscribed to Dark Truths on YouTube because this story is far from over. In fact, it may finally be beginning to crack. And remember, in every lie, there is a tremor, a fracture, a place where the truth starts leaking out. And we are going to find that place no matter where it leads.